Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on building stable dev teams in turbulent times. We're excited that you're here and we have a great discussion planned for today. Thank you for those of you who have already filled out our welcome poll. If you're just joining us, it would be great if you could take a minute to fill it out. For those of you joining from Zoom, you should see the poll on your screen, or if you're joining from LinkedIn, you can respond to the poll in the chat. In the meanwhile, I'll introduce myself. My name is Tracy Garrett, and I am the marketing coordinator at Turbulent, and I will be your host for our webinar today. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping announcements. If you're joining us from Zoom today, feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your window to submit any questions you would like us to answer. Or if you're joining from LinkedIn, you may submit your questions in the chat. You can send in questions at any time during the webinar, and we will answer as many as possible. Today, I have the honor of introducing our CEO, Kevin Sandall, who will kick off our webinar this afternoon with a brief presentation on the key challenges in the tech talent market. As the co-founder and the CEO of Turbulent, Kevin is passionate about leading and coaching high-performing global development teams. Kevin has over 25 years of experience working across an array of industries, helping technology leaders build innovative software solutions. Following his brief presentation, he will be joined by Lucas Cherry of Give Interactive and Matt Volmer of Aubrey Technologies for a panel discussion on strategies and experiences navigating the tech talent market. So without further ado, Kevin, I'll hand it over to you to introduce the topic for our webinar today.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. It's great to be here with everyone today, and want to spend just a couple minutes here at the front end of this hour that we have with you, just setting the stage a little bit of what's going on in the market and what we're seeing happening in terms of tech talent and the churn that we're seeing in the market. And then we'll spend the bulk of the time talking to Lucas and Matt about their experiences, and then answering your questions at the end. So recently, Harvard Business Review published a study and made this statement that empirical data shows that stable teams are 60% more productive and 60% more responsive to customer input than teams that rotate members. And I think this is something that intuitively we all would agree with and kind of see and understand, that having a team that doesn't have a lot of changes happening in it is going to be more productive and going to generate a better result than one that has a lot of changes happening within the team. However, in the market that we're in today, achieving 60% or achieving a highly stable team that doesn't have any changes happening is very, very difficult, as we look at what has been labeled over the last few months as the Great Resignation in the US. And this is data here on the screen from the US taken in November of 2021. So just in the last few months, we're seeing the same trend, not just in the US, but globally, that a lot of people are starting to look at, or not starting to, have been changing jobs, have been moving roles from one team to, one company to the next. And lots of different reasons are stated, but you can see here some of the primary ones are dissatisfaction with the role that they're in, the opportunity to advance professionally, to find a new place to work or a new challenge in their career. Compensation has been a big factor. Stress and burnout. The pandemic led to a lot of people working remotely, working at home, and creating a lot of stress and a lot of burnout as they overworked or found themselves trying to balance a lot of competing priorities that then left them burnt out. But then there's some of these other smaller things here where we have health and team and culture, not believing in the company that they're working for anymore. And all of these things have led to us seeing a lot of rising costs in the tech market, a lot of difficulty finding and retaining talent. As we look at the effects of this burnout of the people, engineers, software engineers, and tech talent becoming unhappy in their jobs, or even just the fact that they were not able to make a change for a couple of years as they were waiting out the pandemic, and now there's this opportunity to move. And so they're taking advantage of it. We're seeing a lot of that happening. We're seeing that across the globe. It's interesting to see what's happening as individuals are making those changes, and what the effect it's having on our software development teams, on our opportunities to drive our projects. And it's creating a lot of churn within projects. We at the beginning of the call, we asked the question, put a poll out there just to see what your responses were, what your experience has been, and where you're finding the greatest challenges. So Tracy, do you have the results from that poll?
We're still waiting for some more results to come in, so maybe we can share a little later on.
We'll come back to that then in a few minutes. So if you get a chance and can answer the question that's in the poll there, that'd be great. We can get your responses too. But as we look at the Great Resignation and its impact, and we look at just the last 2.5 years of time, we can see that the attrition rate of employees at companies has been steadily increasing over the last 2.5 years as more and more people have been leaving or changing their jobs. And the chart you see on the graph, or the graph you see on the screen right now, is looking at over the last through the end of 2021. And the question that is in most of our minds is what's going to happen in 2022, and how is that going to impact our businesses? So in just the last couple of weeks, several studies have been released and discussed. One of them from Gartner, another one from the Muse, and there's been a couple others, and they're all finding very similar findings as they interview and talk to tech workers and workers that have been involved in changing jobs or moving from one company to the next. And what they're finding is that about 70% of those people are saying that they're experiencing or anticipate experiencing regret over those changes, over having changed jobs. And so they've made that change, and now they're not happy with the new place that they've landed. And furthermore, that 70%, many of them are saying that will probably not stay in the job that they just moved to. Another article that I looked at just recently was talking about the fact that many of them no longer have any qualms about moving from the job they just took within a month, 2 months, 3 months, if they're not happy in that job. And so what researchers are anticipating is that we just came through this Great Resignation. Maybe we're still experiencing it, but there's probably going to be another wave, a Great Resignation Part 2, if you will, that we'll see in 2022 as people that made that first shift are dissatisfied or not happy and are looking then to make a second or a third shift. And the big question is this going to become a permanent thing in the tech industry? Are we going to continue to see people shifting regularly as they find dissatisfaction in the job that they've taken on? So this obviously creates a lot of churn. It creates a lot of challenges in the marketplace. So one of the things that we've been looking at is how do you create a stability in your projects when people are constantly looking to move and are in flux? And so one of the things that we look at is trying to create outcome-based stability. If we can't keep all the same people on the project all the time, what can we do to create reliability across the team? What can we do to create dependable results, to generate consistent outcomes, even if people are transitioning, are changing jobs? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as we talk to Matt and Lucas here and see what their experience has been and some of the things that they've done to deal with that churn, to deal with the changes happening in their teams, and to deal with the fact that people are in flux in the marketplace. So with that, Tracy, I don't know if we've got some answers on the poll, or we can keep moving forward.
Yes, we have a couple of people that have participated so far, and they said, so for the question, I'll just repeat it, is as you navigate the turbulence in the tech market, What do you find most challenging? Finding quality talent, retaining talent, or maintaining momentum despite team changes mid-project? So far, the majority have said that number or letter A, finding quality talent is most difficult.
Okay, great. So we'll hopefully address some of the things that Matt and Lucas have done to help them in finding that quality talent. So as we step into just this next segment, I want to quickly have Matt introduce Matt and Lucas, and just ask Matt, Lucas, if you guys could take a few seconds each or a minute each and just introduce yourselves and a little bit about your companies. Lucas, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Great to be with you all today. Yeah, I'm founder and CEO of Give Interactive. We are a software platform for foundations. And so I come from the finance side, CPA background, used a lot of different software platforms. And then about 3.5 years ago, decided to start Give Interactive and launch a new software platform specifically in the charitable giving and charitable investment space. So we have a split team. We have some team that is the majority of our team is here in the US and our direct staff. And then we've also partnered with Covalence for some additional resources over this last year. And so that's been a great partnership for us, and excited to jump into the discussion today.
Thanks, Lucas. Matt, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Matt Ballmer, CEO and co-founder of Arboré Technologies. We're an inventory management system company in the horticulture space, providing mobile and web applications driven by radio frequency identification technology. So basically tracking plants from seed to sale. I live in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, married to my wife, and I have 3 daughters. So I'm a dad of 3 girls. My youngest is 2 and my oldest is 11. We have a mostly offshore team at this point. We actually transitioned from a mostly in-house team end of 2021 to mostly offshore with the Covalence team earlier this year, end of last year. And so we've had a pretty interesting experience in what is certainly a very turbulent time. And, you know, Covalence has been a great partner in that transition.
All right, thanks, guys. So Lucas and Matt, you both are running software companies with building a software product. You're at slightly different stages in the development of your product and of your companies. But in the last 6 months to a year, as you've had to, manage running your software teams and building your products, what have you found to be the biggest challenges that you've had to face to keep your product development moving forward and keep the wheels on the cart, so to speak? Lucas, you wanna go ahead and?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think some of the biggest challenges has been the consistency and turnover of team members, and so that's been something that we've had to build around and work through over this last year. I think as we've seen turnover be unusually high in this market, it's caused us to really look at how are we consistently managing our processes across the company. And I love how you said the outcome-based stability, but then it's also really driven us to look at how do we build stable teams and how do we manage against the risk of turnover, and how do we continue to build a tighter team that experiences less attrition. And so that's been a huge effort for us over this last 6 months, is building out some of the key leadership and shared priorities across the team. We'll get into some of that, I think, in some other discussion ahead. But one of the biggest challenges has been knowledge transfer. When you're building out complex software platforms, every day that your dev team works on it, they become more entrenched and more knowledgeable and have more domain knowledge both on your customers and your platform. And so anytime you're seeing that either walk out the door or lose some of that, it requires a lot of additional investment to rebuild that. And so for us, we've been relatively successful at finding really strong talent. For us, it's been how do we share knowledge and domain expertise across that talent as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And so for us, that's been probably the biggest challenge in this market, is that shared domain knowledge and expertise across the team.
Great. Thanks, Lucas. How about you, Matt? What's your experience been?
Yeah, so I would basically echo exactly what Lucas just said. I think our experience has been pretty much spot on to that. As I think about it, I think there's kind of like two prongs to the issue, right? There's how do we prevent turnover, but then also how do we get extremely agile, knowing that there's only so much we can do to control that turnover, and get people ramped up as quickly as we possibly can, so that we can navigate the turnover. So, really good documentation, maintaining process and procedure, and really good knowledge transfer, I think are, the best ways to be able to do that. And so, we've really just continued to try to focus on, okay, right now times are turbulent. What can we do to navigate those transitions? So essentially our projects, don't skip a beat. Our customers don't feel the impact of those transitions or that turnover, and we can kind of just keep going business as usual. There's going to be bumps in the road and challenges, and we've got to stay, nimble as we navigate those changes, and stay flexible, more flexible than ever. But if you've got good process, good documentation, you can get folks up to speed much more quickly, which I think has just been critical in these times. So just more or less echoing Lucas's comments there.
Okay. That's great. And both of you guys have mentioned documentation. You mentioned knowledge transfer as some of the things that you use to build stability across your teams, even while the people in those teams maybe are changing at times. Are there other things that you found helpful for building stability into your dev teams, into your processes, beyond the knowledge transfer and the documentation? Are there some other tools or processes, things that you guys have found to be really helpful in that, in creating that stability that you need to push out your product week in and week out?
Yeah, I think for us, we've really invested a lot of time in kind of flattening out the team, in the sense of, instead of kind of dev just picking up tickets and then the business and sales side working with the clients, we found that trying to bring some of those disciplines much closer together during this time has helped with that shared domain knowledge. No one really loves reading 100 Confluence pages from a documentation perspective. And so for us, we've used a lot of video tools of, recording sessions and trying to have different forms of medium of documentation. So outside of just a Confluence page or, putting in comments and code, we've really tried to bring the knowledge of the platform a layer up. And that part has been really successful for us, is bringing our dev team closer to the sales team, bringing our sales team closer to the dev team. That knowledge gap, I think it's easy for non-technical people like myself to think, okay, the devs are just going to learn everything out of the code, the code base. But a lot of times helping them to understand what is the product doing and what is it solving. So one thing we started lunch and learns with our clients. So our clients can have people come in and meet with our dev teams and kind of walk through a day in the life of them operating on our software platform. And little things like that have really helped to share that kind of knowledge and wealth across all different departments of our team.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lucas. Matt.
Yeah. So again, we've done something similar to what Lucas has described, and I think at the end of the day, the stability of the team, it's a two-way street, right? So the folks on your team, they want stability as well. So your sprint schedule, what you're prioritizing, how you're prioritizing that work, you want to have a stable process. You don't want to be constantly shifting priorities midstream in the sprint. Then you're dealing with things like context switching and other challenges. And so just remember that your teammates also want that stability. And so you should be trying to drive a process and procedure that is, providing mutual stability for everyone, and keeping people, engaged in the work that they're doing. I think the documentation piece is interesting as well. We kind of structured our team so that we sort of have a business analyst that is sort of the go-between the development team and the customer, which allows us to stay really, really customer centric. And I think that's been a really good effort for us, to be able to be direct with those customers as much as we possibly can. And then I think on the documentation side, I think we found that user focused documentation is great, but it typically falls short of the documentation that more technical resources need. So, when I heard Lucas talking about that, I was really just talking about, the effort to level up your documentation for more technical resources, because they're really not one and the same. So that's been a positive improvement for us as well.
Okay. Now, I know both of you guys have gone through kind of a journey over this last year and a half, and done a lot of had a lot of structural changes within your teams, experimented with different makeups of your team, local engineers versus offshore versus outsourced and contracted. Can you maybe each just kind of walk us through a little bit of that journey, and what have been some of the key decision criteria you use to kind of decide what makes the optimal team, and how do I balance that out? Maybe we'll start with you this time, Matt.
Yeah, so I think you've got the go-to, right? So looking at your tech stack, and what skills do we need? What knowledge and skills do we need? And what kind of capacity do we need to work in those specific areas of the technology? So, that's kind of fundamental first and foremost. But then for us, we've also found that given the type of work that we do and the seasonality of our business, we had to make sure that we had resources in certain time zones. So we have some in India, we have a resource in Montreal, Canada now as well, and one in South Africa. And we're thinking about adding one more resource stateside that's in our exact time zone, more for kind of hypercare type support for our customers. So time zone, may be obvious, but it's something to really think about in terms of what's work that's more of a hot fix, or work that needs to be done in a really short time frame with a quick turnaround, versus work that has maybe a longer lead time to be accomplished. So that's a big thing that we're, to be honest, still trying to find the right balance for. But I think, if the skills and resources are lined up, and you've got the time zone lined up, I think those are, two of the big factors for us when we're looking at putting the team together. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think, Kevin, for us, we have done a number of different outsourcing structures since our inception about 3.5-4 years ago. And one thing that I've learned is we don't really want to outsource anything. We want to find like those key few partners that might be how we structure our team. But for us, we've just found that trying to run like in-house and outsource and like keep them kind of separate is just not super viable for us. So for us, it really is more about like finding a key partner that has expertise and skill set that we might not be able to readily acquire in the market, and then heavily investing in that one or two partners, but trying to do it in a way where we look at it as our team and bringing that together from all aspects. Because frankly, we've done some where, you kind of throw it over the wall to some outsourced vendor and then they throw it back. And that just has not really turned out for us to be super successful. So I think, yes, we've partnered like with Covalence, and we've partnered at times with others as well, but bringing that kind of collective team together. And also, like, we never speak internally of like our outsourced partner. We always just say, this person on our team versus this person on our team, and really trying to bring that to be cohesive together has been, I think, important, not just from the conceptual perspective, but from the practical perspective as well. And so it has helped us, having having a lot of split time zones with our development team, because we get almost 24-hour coverage, of progress that's happening. And we've really seen that that's increased our efficiencies. So I think when we're looking at it, I think one mistake that we've made is getting too diluted with partners to where we have too many partners we're trying to manage. And that's been something that has just really weighed on our management teams, is trying to pick expertise from different places and really looking for a good sized partner that can bring the right resources. For us, one piece that's been really important to me is finding the right fit with the partners. Too big and it's hard to work through sometimes, the bureaucracy and the tiers. Too small and they may not have the resources that you need when you need to pull people off of the bench. And so that's been really critical to our success, is finding the right partners. Covalence has been a great partner for us, and one that we've continued to invest in over this last year.
Thanks, Lucas. And you kind of hit on it. You didn't say it specifically, but I know you and I and Matt, we've had this conversation at different times about the importance of relationships, both at the corporate level between, you use the word partner, but that idea of having a relationship where there's a give and a take, and there's a cohesiveness to how we work, but then also down at the individual level, right? With the people that you're working with, whether they be your internal talent or your partner talent. Can you guys maybe talk a little bit about what you found, the importance of that relationship, and what are some of the things that you do to really make sure that that's in place to help with driving stability in your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think I found you always have times that you have to lean into your people. And if you haven't sown into those relationships, there's not going to be a great response on those lean in times. And so I think for us, having those relationships at all levels, and it might not be all me, there's not enough time to go around for everyone, but really delegating. One thing that we've been intentional on the management side is delegating relationship buddies through the process. That's been a big help in our stability, is not letting developers, especially in a remote work environment, becoming too much of islands. As soon as someone becomes an island and kind of just in their own world and not connected day in and day out, that's where we've seen some challenges with quality and attrition. And so I think both at kind of the executive level, being really intentional on building relationships throughout the team with the executive level, but then also persisting that out and trying to create, we've created a buddy system with both on all kind of sides of our team, so that there is that shared knowledge, so that if someone is taking some time off, they don't feel like they are the single point of failure or the single point of success to the team.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we kind of think of it too as just building redundancy and cross-training with resources on the team. Especially with the different time zones, kind of making sure that the team in a certain time zone can work together with each other if somebody on a different time zone is not available. But I think just from a relationship building standpoint too, and these are sort of just tactical examples. So this is going to sound very, very small, but I put the Indian and Hindu calendars on my business calendar so that I could see when there were holidays and things going on in India. And small things like that, I think kind of connect people on a more human level than just the work itself. And I think that helps build rapport and helps the lines of communication be a little bit more candid or open. So when you do need to lean in, or there is a challenge, it's easier to work through those challenges, because I think the teammates are maybe a little bit more invested in the relationship. I don't know if I'm fully successful at that. I'm still learning as I'm going, but I think, really just thinking of it as a holistic team, not our team and their team, one team. I think that mindset in and of itself makes a huge difference. So how do I interact with my peers on my team stateside, and how do I interact with the peers that are not stateside, and really, how do I stay consistent in that team interaction across the board? Still learning by far, but I guess that's just one sort of tactical example of investing in what's going on in your team's world, even though it's on the other side of the globe or in a different time zone.
Great, thanks. So we've talked quite a bit about some of the processes and best practices and things that we can put in place to try to create more stability across our teams. What do you guys do when the inevitable person decides to move on from your team and you lose that talent, either because it wasn't a great fit or because the market challenges that we talked about earlier are leading people to leave? How do you respond in that situation? What have you guys found to be a helpful way to kind of move through that when you do lose a key player or a key person on the team that is moving on? How do you fill that gap?
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of start with this one. We've experienced a lot of this in the last 4 months, and I think what's been very great about our team is that we have focused on the solution. It's in one of our company's core values. We're problem solution oriented. So yeah, it can be painful. We know there's going to be bumps in the road, but we're focused on acting quickly and solving the problem rather than dwelling on the challenge. And in this environment, there's more turbulence than stability. So you have to adapt to that and accept that and focus on what's going to solve the problem. So, overlap between resources. If you have a good relationship with your teammate, they may be willing to stay on an extra month or two and train up the new person. They may be even willing to help you find the new resource or their replacement. We've had quite a few folks actually stay on our team on a part-time basis for 2, 3, 4 months after the full-time gig had ended. And I think that really comes down to relationships and mutual trust. You're not going to be able to do those things and have those kinds of transition plans if you don't have a healthy culture with a healthy level of trust. And so those are two big things. And then really diligently working together as a team to complete that knowledge transfer as quickly as you possibly can, and get those folks, the new teammates, exposed to the things they need to be exposed to with a guide or observer there to kind of walk them through it the first time. Those are some of the things that we found. Would love to hear your thoughts, Lucas.
I was just going to say ditto, but I think yeah, I think one of the things that we've really tried to do is we've hired a lot of people in this last year and a half is upfront committing to the team composition as a company. And so what that has meant is we've both lost good quality people, and then we've also been really rigorous at not how would I say, forcing some attrition at times too. I mean, we've had some people, when you brought on a bunch of new developers, you're not going to bat 1,000 on new hires. And so we've been really intentional at when we see an individual or a team member that is not a good fit, not letting that persist. My natural is I'll try to give sometimes a little too much grace at times because I really want to see someone be a success and give them time. But in this market, I think that can really drag down your other team members. And so we made some mistakes early on of letting some of our dev team that were pulling the rest of the team down just kind of continue in hopes that we could get them back to the right place. And we've switched that a little bit. We've tried to be very gracious, but at the same time make rapid adjustments and make tweaks, because we can't expect that. And so that's actually, I think that's been really well received by our development team, because they've seen that we've been both committed to hiring and committed to firing if something is not working out. And I think that's healthy with the team, because then they see that we are committed to building a team that works really well together. That's not fun, that's not popular, but I think it's also important at building stable teams, because having just really strong performers is great, but if you have a whole part of your team that is really pulling them down and slowing down the process and causing a lot of rework, that can be equally detrimental too.
Sure. And likely to maybe drive some of those top performers out as well,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
yeah.
great. I have to ask this question. As you guys have worked through the turbulence in the market, and as you've kind of dealt with all these different challenges, trying to keep your product development moving forward and your team stable, what's the role that outsourcing has played for you? Where do you see the value in it? And how has it helped you? And Lucas, you used the word partners, so we can use that term as well. But how have you found that those partnering relationships have really added value to you? Where do you see the biggest value that comes from that?
I think the obvious is spin up time. If you trying to organically recruit 10 to 15 developers really fast is really hard, and you can do it. We've done a lot of recruiting, but I think that's the first. But then also equal to that is bringing together a team that has already worked together too, and that have some of that process management in place. It does help with much faster onboarding and adoption when you have a team that is already in a structure of running a project internally that you can bring into your mix, rather than kind of the individual independent contractor or individual hire. So I don't think it's a one or the other. I think it's a both and the importance of that has been where we've really seen value is, like in partnering with Covalence, already having a lot of the core structure and the rigor around a development lifecycle, and partnering that with our team has been much more successful than just kind of doing the developers for hire model, where you might go through like a staffing agency or something like that to get bodies to sit in seats. We've had that works, I'm sure, for some people. For us, we've had a lot less success there than partnering with someone that can kind of manage the process side of it as well.
And I would say for us, in addition to those things, I think of it in a lot of ways as outsourcing a significant portion of our HR function. Covalence's ability to find talent, hire talent, assemble teams, ramp resources up, cross train. Their strength in that area is significantly exceeds our ability to do those things in a far less amount of time. And so, really, I think our HR function is growing and evolving, but we've been able to essentially outsource that portion of it. So, I try to think of it as not just the resources on the team, but the resourcing aspect of it, to make those hires, to post a job description, to do interviews. That whole process can be is much longer and much more costly if we're doing all of that work in-house. And so with Covalence, we've just had a tremendous peace of mind knowing that whole function is pretty much taken care of, right? And saves us a tremendous amount of time, and happens much more quickly than we would be able to execute in-house right now.
So if you guys are giving advice to another software company that's looking to figure out how to find the right partner to build out a similar type of function to what you guys have done with your development teams, what would be your advice to them? What criteria would you recommend they look at as they evaluate those potential partnerships?
Yeah, so I mean, these are just some obvious things, but, a proven track record, right? You're going to want to see use cases or, references or testimonials from other business owners. In my case, we have a board member who had a really good working relationship with Covalence. That was a great, that recommended us or referred us to Covalence. And, so someone within network, we had tried some other offshore work in the past and had some pretty abysmal experiences with that. And so, you want to talk to folks that have a proven track record. I think you want to really know what you're getting. I've heard stories of folks, especially using offshore resources, where they get on a conference call with their team and the names of the resources are all different than the bios that they thought the resources were on their team. And so you want to do your due diligence, right? Covalence does a really good job of sharing the biographies of the teammates and the resources. So who's on your team, what their experience is, what their skill sets are. And it's very transparent. And so it's really an extension of your existing team. So you want to look out for that kind of thing. And then I would also say, again, time zones from a management standpoint, having too many different teams in too many different time zones can be really, really difficult to manage. So you want to be conscious of that. But at the same time, look at the time zones as an opportunity to leverage the value of those differences. So if you've got, one resource on Central Time, they could be starting work and then hand that work off to another resource in the other time zone, and by the time I come into the office at 8 a.m., the work is done. So there's a multiple to look at with that time zone factor as well. But, I think if you approach it similar to your in-house hiring process and look for that proven track record with other companies that have great experience, I think it can be a very, very positive experience. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of stigmas out there from bad experiences, but there are also a lot of really good ones. So, just be careful not to write off that opportunity too soon, which I think unfortunately happens a little too often. But what do you think, Lucas?
Yeah, I think honestly, my success has been a mixed bag. So I don't know if I have the track record to really be the like I've batted 1,000 on this, but I think some of the things that I've really looked for and learned over the years has been having a good mix of trust with the partner, but then also being very involved in the process. I think we've made some mistakes on both sides of that, where we've tried to like dictate to such a level of granularity that we were micromanaging. And then I think we've been in other situations with partners where we've just like given requirements and expected that they return a quality product. And there's a fine balance in there. And so I think for us, the model that's really been working at a much higher proficiency level has been having enough resources and management on our side that are working day in and day out with whoever you're partnering with has been really critical to our success. And so I think also, candidly, Kevin, we kind of dipped our toe in the water first and see how it goes, and then decide, all right, before we go all in and really invest heavily, let's make sure we can walk before we can run. You don't always have the luxury of that in business. Sometimes you just have to make a decision and go. But I think that if you have the opportunity to partner and start that and earn the trust collectively between partners, that's really where you can start to see good decision making and a much higher success rate. And so for us, that's been something that we've really appreciated about Covalence, is their willingness to go with us through that journey. And I think it's really set us up, and we're seeing the rewards from that now.
Great, thanks. I want to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right. I was going to say I want to give a chance to the audience to ask some questions. So if you haven't yet and you have a question you'd like to ask, please go ahead and use the Q&A function if you're on Zoom, or the comments on LinkedIn, and send us some questions. Tracy, do we have any questions at the moment that have come in?
We're still waiting for some to come in, so if you have more.
Okay, so while we're waiting, and if people want to take a minute to think and then submit a question or two, I'll just ask Lucas and Matt. You guys talked a lot about trust and building trust. Do you guys have any kind of practical things that you've done as part of working with your teams to really encourage that trust, or to develop that trust between your team members, whether they be across those partnerships? What are some of the things that you guys have done that you feel have really helped to generate that trust from a very practical level?
Yeah, so some of these things definitely, I mean, they're going to sound cliche, but in a lot of ways, it's not much different than building trust with your stateside teammates or in-house teammates, right? You want to have a candid culture where when there are problems, you can talk about those problems, and you can praise things when things are going well, right? And celebrate those wins too. So I think good agile ceremonies really help with that. Just having really good retros, that's, a really basic thing, and sticking to those ceremonies consistently. I think consistency is key there. So celebrate the wins, talk about the problems, and move the needle, essentially. I think, again, it's not going to sound like rocket science, but I think sometimes people get wrapped up in more of like a blame game or a finger pointing match, rather than focusing on, here are the facts, what's the solution, and let's charge forward together to solve the problem. And more often than not, if there is an issue that needs to be worked through, or a challenge, there are improvements or adjustments that need to be made with both organizations or teams working together. It's usually not a one-sided issue. And so, I think it ultimately comes down to collaborative problem solving, knowing that, folks aren't going to be skewered if there's a mistake or a problem, that we're going to approach things collaboratively to solve the problem together, versus sort of a blame game kind of scenario. And honestly, I think, that's kind of the culture we have internally in our company. And I think that we've really worked to make sure that we have the same culture with our holistic team and the Covaliance partners as well. So I think that those are just some good examples. And sometimes I even say to our team, specifically, like, look, this is a safe environment. Let's get the issues, let's get the facts on the table, and let's hash this out. This isn't an environment where there's a dumb question. There is no such thing as a dumb question. It's software, it's difficult, right? We don't all know everything, myself included. No one ever will. So, let's just have that level of transparency and work together. And I think it's the repetition of that type of environment in your different ceremonial meetings that starts to build that trust over time. So those are just some examples. Some of that's pretty fundamental, I think, but those are some things that seem to work well for us.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that Matt said, and I think we share a lot of how we approach it. Organizational and team stability, I think, is what gives your team and provides your team with a sense of confidence and optimism, especially in times of like disruption or pressure. And so, just like any relationship, trust takes time and it has to be earned. And so I think that stability does bring, though, a sense of calm and a sense of trust. And I love, as Matt and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and he had mentioned how, at the start, maybe not trying to kind of just outsource to a partner the simple things, and keeping all like, what you deem in your mind is like the complex, kind of like, okay, we got to hold on to that. But really starting to open that up has been a big win for us, because it's brought collective trust between all sides of the development team. And so, we started out, with kind of giving smaller, well-packaged things to Covalent's team alongside. And then like our kind of senior dev team was maintaining all the like what we deemed as the complex items. But as that's evolved, we've really been able to grow this, not only like, I think the relational trust is key, but also like the work product trust is a huge factor. And that almost from a pure developer to developer perspective, that almost builds trust the fastest. If someone can, especially like on our kind of senior management team, if we can hand something off and then what we get back, we're like, they did an awesome job at this. There's something about that like immediately garnishes more relationship building and trust. And so building both like the relational from like a conversational and getting to know people, but also a work product trust. I think those two things together are key to building out, a hybrid model across your team and development team. But it takes trust. It takes, saying, all right, I'm going to let go of this one, the thing that I think only I or only this select group of people can do. And when you earn that trust, it really can reap a lot of rewards collectively across the teams.
Great. Thanks. Those are some really great insights. Tracy, do we have any questions that have come in?
Yes, I do have one question here. So the question asks, Kevin, in your presentation, you had talked about this idea of outcome-based stability. So we know in the tight technical market right now, we may not always have the same team members on our team, but producing stable outcomes is important. So how can one go about creating or ensuring outcome-based stability in the midst of a turbulent market? Are there certain strategies that have been helpful? What's your perspective? And this is open to anyone.
Sure. So Lucas, Matt, when do you guys want to take that one?
Tough one. It really is a tough one. So to be honest, I don't know if I have the answer to that. I mean, I think to some degree, no matter what you do to ramp up new resources, have overlap, do the knowledge transfer, there are going to be bumps in the road. And I think you have to anticipate or expect that your throughput is probably going to be impacted to some degree, and you have to account for that. So I'd love to hear what you guys think, because there's probably things that I might be missing or things I can learn in this discussion about this. But I think the reality is that if your throughput is 50 points a sprint and you turn over half your team in 3 months, you're going to have some bumps in your throughput. I don't think it's realistic to expect it to be bump free, right? And so I think that's just the reality of business. It takes time for people to get up to speed, and there's going to be challenges. But if you have the right culture established, you can work through those challenges together and get through that turbulent time. I don't think there's a silver bullet that makes sure there's no blip in your outcome or no blip in your throughput on let's say a sprint by sprint basis. That's my observation. Again, I could be doing something wrong. Maybe there's something we should be doing differently. But I try to at least put these things into context a little bit, and just realize that at the end of the day, we are all human beings and we're working through these challenging times together. And there are going to be setbacks and challenges that have to be worked through. We're not machines that are programmed to hit a specific throughput every sprint, right? So that's my take. Maybe I'm a little bit in left field on that, but would love to hear what you guys think.
Lucas, you got any thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was hoping Matt was going to go first, because this is a hard one. It's a hard one to know how to answer. I think, practically speaking, it's forced us to have a bigger team than what I sometimes think we should need. And that's like a really hard thing from like a financial perspective to continue to monitor and manage against. But it's required, just given the market that we see, we've had to find a way to run a little bit of a larger bench and a larger team than what I candidly really like, and trying to also over invest in certain areas around, like, practically speaking, like QA and some of the like business, the like BA or business analyst side, because when you run into attrition, you can bring in new people and they can be really good developers, but in that attrition cycle, you have to have someone that's going to sit down with them and walk through, okay, I just got this ticket, I have no clue what this means, I can see it in the code base. And so helping to walk through that, it's on a practical sense, it's just required us to run a little bit higher team rate to account for some of the season too.
Yeah, those are good insights. And Matt, I think earlier you actually pointed out a couple of things that I think also help. You talked about, not having a lot of independent contractors all over the place, but having some of those resources condensed in kind of a co-located. So when you work with a team offshore, you've got 5 or 6 people that are sitting around with each other. So they're sharing knowledge naturally because they're together. Whereas when you start spreading them out, each one's working kind of in an individual silo. And some of the things that we've done with both of you guys as we've worked through is sometimes you have a fractional resource. So you've got several half resources instead of one whole person working on your project, which allows you to have some redundancy. If one person goes on leave or resigns or moves off, you can, kind of move between those two. That's another way that we've worked with not just you guys, but others in terms of trying to help create a little bit more fluidity when things do change, right? So I think there's, and then, when you work with a team that is not employees, but contracted, we have some ability to provide some just ramp up time that's not costing you when someone leaves and we bring in a replacement, or we are ramping up for kind of the next phase and you need to bring some people up. So I don't know if either one of you have had that experience yet, but I know that with some of the folks we've worked with, where we've got a couple of half FTEs working on a project, and all of a sudden a spike comes or there's a need to accelerate that, you're able to ramp them up faster without having to train somebody new and get them started from zero. You've got somebody who's already knows your product. They're just expanding the amount of capacity that they're giving you. So those are some of the things that we've experienced that can help with that. Dealing with the turbulence and dealing with somebody leaving a project and being out. Well, I guess Lucas, you even had we brought in a couple of our folks that you needed some extra capacity, and we spun them up, kind of at a slight overtime level for a period while we got some new people in. And that's easier to do when you've got multiple people that you can go to and ask if they're willing to do that for a period of time, right? And so those are some of the things that we've done with you guys and with others to address that stability issue. Tracy, did you have another question?
I think, well, I do have one more. I guess we can go a couple minutes longer, no problem. So one more question, I'll just open this out. What do you believe is the key to retaining top tech talent in the midst of a turbulent market? Whether it's, in-house or a team you partner with, what have you found to be most helpful?
I can start on that one. That one I can speak to. I think for us, it is, interestingly, Kevin, one of, I think, your top charts early on in the presentation was like dissatisfaction with the role or the position. And so one of the things we've really done is we've been bringing others, and primarily our top tech talent, much deeper into the decision-making process, because everyone wants to be able to use their experience to help influence decisions and directions of the software platform, but also of like the company and the team. And so I think, some of the practical things we've done is we've put together like a tech steering team or a tech steering committee, so to speak, where we put a lot of our top tech talent in that group. And that's like really brought a lot of collaboration, and I think a lot of just job satisfaction, because they're collaborating together a lot more and they're bouncing ideas off to each other a lot more than it was happening just organically kind of in stand-ups or in other meetings. And so I think we've really been focused, because candidly, we probably aren't the most competitive in compensation, especially when you look at, I live in Kansas City, you can work in the middle of Kansas and get a job for a Silicon Valley firm and never leave your basement. And so that whole like competitive market with the work remote that has come out of kind of the COVID years has really caused a lot of the competitive nature of compensation to just look different. At least that's what we've experienced. And so we both had to increase our compensation packages, but we've also really been focused on making sure that our top tech talent has buy-in and say into where their career is going and what their position looks like, and then not being so rigorous into roles and responsibilities that we can't flex around who our people are. And so we've really been intentional about building out our process and our team around the people we have, rather than just strictly off of process. It's kind of both sides, but that's been an area that's really helped us on retention, is letting people really have a seat at the table to have influence and input into key decisions.
Those are great. I think so. I think as a business owner, from a cost standpoint, I think a lot of companies, frankly, are looking at the U.S. market right now, and they're deciding, do I want to compete in this market, or do I just want to move my resources to a different market? And frankly, we moved most of ours to our partner Covalence, and decided that the market in the United States was, one, it was going to be too slow to ramp folks up, and two, in a lot of ways, we were sort of outpriced. And so, from a compensation standpoint, it's very, very aggressive. And from what we've seen, most of the jumps that we've seen with talent that had been with us and turned over has been compensation driven. And so I think you really have to look at, is now a time where you want to compete on the dollars side of the equation or not? And I think for us, we're very fortunate that we have a partner, Covalence, that has worked with our cost structure, could scale quickly, where maybe we're not quite as competitive intentionally in the U.S. market. The issue of resources who live in very low cost areas, very rural areas, but work for companies positioned in Silicon Valley, let's say, right? Their cost of living is extremely low, yet they're pulling big market wages. And our business is headquartered in a rural area, right? So we're not going to be having wages that align with that compensation structure. And so, it's a really interesting time. I think, right or wrong, I think different business leaders are making different decisions. And, to some degree, our company has kind of decided that we weren't going to compete as much as we had in the past in this market, because I think we felt that, one, the cost structure wasn't aligned well, and two, the market's a little too hot right now. You don't always have the luxury to do that, but if you do have a really good partner like Covalence, I think you have the opportunity to do that. And I think more business leaders should be taking advantage of those opportunities. Maybe there's some fear or lack of trust, kind of nested in that, that's preventing some business leaders from making some of those changes. But I do think we're still kind of finding that right balance. I think we are looking at maybe adding one in-house individual in the next couple of months, because we found we kind of need the balance between the two. So, it's always evolving. We're always adapting that, but it's that might sound a little bit cynical, but I'll be honest, I am a little bit cynical about the U.S. market right now. It's gotten pretty crazy. So that's my take.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Lucas, Matt, and Kevin. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today for questions. However, if you have more, we'd be happy to talk with you further. Our contact information should be on the screen here shortly. And later today, we'll be sending out a copy of today's webinar recording and slide deck if you'd like to take a look at that. And in an effort to continue bringing you valuable content, we would appreciate your feedback on this webinar. We have shared a link to a short feedback survey in the chat. You can see that there. And lastly, we'd like to give a very big thank you to Kevin, Lucas, and Matt for your time today and for sharing strategies that you have found helpful for navigating the turbulent talent market. So thank you again for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed our webinar and we look forward to seeing you next time.